Chester and Portugal Tom enjoy Christmas, a short story by L.D. Roberts. December 23rd, 6 minutes after midnight. Portugal Tom and Chester have an exceptionally bad case of the zoomies. Chester races as fast as he can from the back room, all the way through 2 rooms full of books, around the legs of the table in the bay window, and then back again, over and over, zooming and zooming, each time a bit faster. Chester is leading, with Portugal Tom right on his tail. On the 36th round, Chester corners too fast, catching the edge of the table leg with his chin. A teacup goes flying off the table, hits the wall, and crashes to the ground, setting off the burglar alarm. Chester's eyes go wide, his ears go back. The alarm is loud and insistent. Portugal Tom is scared half to death. Together, they race into the dressing room and dive beneath the long dresses and boas. Portugal Tom leaves, goes and closes the door to the back room and the door to the closet, and then they put their paws over their ears. "Are we in trouble?" asks Portugal Tom. Chester doesn't answer him because he doesn't know. Will Charlotte be mad and throw them out of the store into the freezing winter night? Chester shudders at the thought, but he doesn't think so. It is Christmas after all. He isn't quite sure what Christmas is, but he knows the humans get all kissy and throw lots of crinkly paper on the floor. Outside of the store, Charlotte waits at the front door. It's 1:15 a.m. and snowing lightly. She stamps her feet to keep warm, waiting for the police officer to arrive. Finally, she sees headlights coming down Main Street. An officer gets out of the car. The beam from his flashlight makes long shadows in the snow. "Are you Charlotte Jenkins?" "I am," she says, blowing on her hands because she forgot her gloves. "The alarm company called. You wait right here. I'll check things out." She walks to the front door, presses in her code, and unlocks the door for him, then reaches in and turns on the light. Officer Clarkson blinks, waits a second. Charlotte looks over and sees the broken teacup and smiles. She puts her hand on the forearm of the police officer. "You know, Maisie, my mother's cat used to get the zoomies in the middle of the night. She would knock all the magazines off the racks, and we would find her the next morning, sleeping on a stack of Ladies' Home Journal." Charlotte pokes her head in the doorway and points to the broken teacup. "It just might be the cats," she says to the officer. "Cats? 2?" he asks, raising his eyebrows. "That's right, 2 cats. Chester and Portugal Tom. They work here in the store with me. You wait here." He waves her back outside. He steps quietly into each room, eyes alert, and he clears each room until he gets to the back room. He hears some rustling, and very quietly he tiptoes across the room and opens the door. Looks like a costume department exploded. Boas and necklaces, pearls and lace and high heels, purses and long sparkly earrings are everywhere. Inside the closet, Portugal Tom and Chester pretend they aren't scared out of their wits. This is worse than the time the German Shepherd chased them both up a tree. The officer hears a noise and opens the closet door. The flashlight blinds the cats, who blink and growl. "Okay, you 2 heathens. It's time to come out right now. Did you break the teacup and set off the alarm?" They race out of the closet. Chester goes to the left. Portugal Tom goes to the right. Officer Clarkson walks back out to Charlotte, who is hugging herself with cold. He opens the door, beckons her in. "Everything looks okay. I think it was the 2 fur monsters," he says, pointing over at the cats. Charlotte stamps her feet to shake off the snow. "Thank you so much for your help. Please sit," she says, pointing to the table. "I'll make us some hot chocolate." Charlotte turns on the heater and resets the alarm. Officer Clarkson sits, lets his body relax into the chair, pulls off one glove and then the other. and rubs his hands together. He hears cooking noises coming from the small room on the right. He gets up, walks over to Chester and Portugal Tom laying in the window. They stand up and hold their ground. They just had zoomies. They haven't broken any laws. Clarkson starts to pet Portugal Tom. What did you guys do? He asks. Portugal Tom purrs. Chester stares at the officer. Why aren't you petting me? His eyes demand. So the officer starts to pet Chester, who really tries to remain stubborn and defiant. This resolve lasts about 2.3 seconds until he starts to purr. Charlotte comes out holding a tray with 2 mugs of hot chocolate and brownies that Anne the baker across the street made for the shop. I see you have gotten acquainted with Chester and Portugal Tom, my 2 internet superstars, she sighs, putting a mug in front of him. I tried to question both of them, but they lawyered up. Charlotte laughs. Taking the cup, the officer looks up at her for the first time. It's the middle of the night, and she is wearing an old quilted jacket over a pair of flannel pajamas. He notices her eyes are a caramel brown, with tiny gold flecks. Her hair is disheveled into a tangle of curls. She must be at least 40. She's of medium height and could use a few pounds. But when she smiles, there's a soft kindness about her. He takes a sip. It's real hot chocolate, creamy and perfect. He looks over at the tree. It's a large pine that Jameson went up to the forest to cut for Charlotte. It reaches almost 9 feet up to the ceiling. The ornaments begin halfway up the tree. Charlotte originally started putting ornaments at the bottom, but Chester and Portugal Tom broke some ornaments and then ate all the tinsel. What does tinsel taste like, she wonders. Then she realized she really didn't want to know. And she doesn't even want to think about what the litter box looked like that week. It was bittersweet decorating the tree. She and her mother always did it together. Each Christmas, they bought each other a new ornament to put on the tree for the next year. This year, while she was out alone, she bought an ornament of a squirrel wearing underpants on a skateboard. It made her laugh. Looking at the tree, he says, "You really did a nice job." "It wasn't easy," she says. Her eyes get cloudy and far away. "Well, usually decorating the Christmas tree is fun and people look forward to it." "First Christmas without my mother," she says, holding back tears. He reaches over and gently lays his hand on top of hers. "I understand. The first year of holidays without someone you love is the hardest. I lost my wife 5 years ago." "I'm so sorry," she says. They sit in silence. He has one ear cocked, half listening for the radio to beckon him somewhere, but there is only static, so he lets himself relax into the warmth and charm of the bookstore. "I notice," he says, "you only started decorating about halfway up. I'm assuming," he says, pointing a finger at Chester, "I'm assuming he had something to do with it." "Well, after 3 broken Christmas ornaments and a litter box full of tinsel, I moved everything up." He looks over at Portugal Tom, who is sitting quietly, waiting for brownie crumbs. "You ate tinsel?" He laughs. Chester gets a bit peeved. "Why are they being interrogated? It's just a few Christmas balls." And the litter box looked really nice, full of tinsel. They hadn't really done anything wrong. It wasn't like the time the Morrison's German Shepherd threw up a pair of socks. Now that was disgusting, and he should have been arrested for that. Chester has had quite enough of this officer fellow. He turns his tail up and saunters out of the room. He goes back to the closet and catches his tail on the tie of an embroidered Japanese bathrobe that falls off the hanger onto his head, setting off a cascade of costumes that tumble off their hangers. And suddenly, Chester finds himself buried under a Japanese bathrobe and a velvet Victorian wedding dress that weighs 756 pounds, and a pair of lederhosen. For a second, he is frightened. Will he be crushed to death? But then, the velvet feels soft on his fur, and he pokes his nose out from underneath a pile, and he can breathe, and he settles in for a nap. Out in the store, the officer asks, "How's business?" "Much better. For a while, I thought I was going to have to close, but he and his friend showed up to help," she points at Portugal Tom, who is still hoping for a bite of brownie and getting less patient by the second. "A few tourists started taking pictures and put them up on the internet, and now the boys are famous. People come in to visit them, wander around the store, like what they see, and inevitably buy something. So now, I'm doing okay."
25 Henry, return your previous frequency, please.
The officer sits up quickly. "Sorry, I have to go. Thank you for making sure the store was safe." Without thinking, she blurts out, "The store Christmas open house is tomorrow from 2 to 6. I would love it if you would drop by." "I'll see if I can make it," he says, and hurries for the door. The grandfather clock in the next room chimes 3 a.m. Maybe, if she's lucky, she can squeeze in a few more hours of sleep. Leaving the hot chocolate mugs to be washed later, she locks the door and heads back to her nice warm bed. The second she is gone, Portugal Tom screeches at the top of his voice, so loud it wakes Chester up. He spits a lederhosen strap out of his mouth and runs to the front of the store. Chester is surprised. Portugal Tom looks okay. Portugal Tom grins, lifts his paw, and points at the mugs. Chester immediately understands, and simultaneously, they jump on the table, shove their noses into the mugs, and lap up the rest of the hot chocolate from the bottom of the mugs. When Chester is just about finished, then goes to pull out his head. He's not really stuck. He's more cramped. He wiggles his nose, then wiggles his ears, and slowly pulls his head back, then sneezes. When he sneezes, all the drops of hot chocolate that were stuck to his whiskers flick all over Charlotte's white tablecloth. Portugal Tom says, "I have an idea," and lifts his paw toward the empty wooden bookshelf. Charlotte had emptied the shelf that morning, intending to use it for Christmas presents. "Follow me," he says to Chester, so Chester follows him. He runs over to the science fiction section, gets on his back paws, and pulls down the hardback of The Game of Rat and Dragon by Corwiner Smith. The book falls to the floor and begins pushing the book with the tip of his nose across the floor towards the empty bookshelf. Portugal Tom jets over to the fiction section and does the same thing with a copy of Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. "Are these books with cat characters?" asks Chester. "That's right," says Portugal Tom. Portugal Tom impresses Chester more each day. "How do you know which books have cat characters?" he asks. "Can't you hear it?" "Hear what?" "Come on, I'll show you." He curls up in the children's section next to a copy of The Cat in the Hat. "Be still and listen." Chester is a big prowling tomcat. Asking him to be still is like asking him to bark like a dog. He tries and makes it about 6 seconds, then starts licking a paw. "Shh! Be quiet and listen," Portugal Tom says. Chester gets his eyes wide open, points his ears up like radar, and then tries to listen really, really hard again. When he is just about to declare Portugal Tom crazy, he hears something. Very, very soft, faint, and far away. He walks over and puts his ear to the spine of the book. And there it is. A tiny, soft meow. "I hear it," he says, astonished. At night, when you go to sleep, I pick a shelf and get very close and listen. Lots of times I don't hear anything, but if I hear a meow, I know there is a cat somewhere in the story. The next book they went to find was The Cat of the Bubastes by G.A. Henty. It was a very popular book. Then they raced to the classic section. And Portugal Tom sits in front of a copy of Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot. Portugal Tom does not know what a practical cat is, but maybe if he reads the book, he'll figure it out. Slowly, they begin to hear meows until they can hear an entire chorus of cats singing in harmony from the musical. Portugal Tom pulled the book down, and Chester nosed it over to the book pile. Then they raced to find a copy of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Then back to science fiction for a copy of Weird Sisters by Terry Pratchett. The cats in that book have witches for humans, and they put their ears to the spine. And in this book, the meows sound cackly and strange, like the cats had been gargling with bad-tasting mouthwash. By the time they got back to the science fiction section to get a copy of The Door into Summer by Robert Heinlein, they were utterly exhausted, and their noses were very sore from pushing such big books around. They hadn't collected anywhere near all the cat character books. They still had to find Captain Wow, and Demeter, and Grebo, and Maisie Mackenzie, and Petronius the Arbiter. But they were just too tired. After a bit of a rest, Portugal Tom sat thinking. He wanted the cat shelf to be decorative. It was Christmas, after all. So he ran over and pulled the quilted red and green Christmas tree skirt from under the tree and dragged it in his mouth all the way back to the bookshelf. Chester grabbed the other end and they tried to jump up on the top of the shelf so they could put it on top. They tried and tried, but they couldn't make it to the top. Finally, Chester jumped onto the top of the bookshelf and went to the corner, and Portugal Tom stood on his hind legs with the skirt in his mouth, and Chester reached a paw down to him till he could grab the tree skirt and then pull it up to the top of the shelf. Then he rolled over and over on it to smooth out the wrinkles. Then Portugal Tom jumped up to help him. By this time, they were beyond exhausted from all of this thinking and figuring things out and pushing things around. Portugal Tom curled up on the left side of the top of the bookcase, and Chester curled up on the right side, and they went to sleep. And that's how Charlotte found them, fast asleep on top of the tree skirt, snoring like buzzsaws. Frowning at the mess they left on the floor, she picked up a book and went to put it back on the shelf where it belonged. This woke up Portugal Tom, who saw what she was doing and let out a meow to stop her. She turned and looked at him. "What's wrong, Portugal Tom?" He shook his head, pointed his paw at the book, and then back at the empty shelf. Puzzled, Charlotte picked up the copy of The Cat in the Hat off the floor. She looked at several more of the titles she began to understand, and began putting the books from the floor onto the cat bookshelf. Portugal Tom nodded at her in agreement. After she finished shelving their choices, there was still room, so she went and got a copy of Macbeth by William Shakespeare, The Tailor of Gloucester by Beatrix Potter. In the mystery section, she pulled a copy of each and every one of the Cat Who mysteries by Lillian Jackson Braun. The mysteries filled the rest of the shelf. Taking out her phone, she took a picture of the cat sleeping on the shelf and posted it to the store's new Facebook page with the caption, "Bookstore Cats Working Hard." It only took a second for her to receive a response. "Great picture. What a perfect space for people to take selfies with Chester and Portugal Tom." Chester was awakened by the ping on her phone and looks down. "What happened to all the books they picked out?" Charlotte points to the inside of the shelf. Chester leans over the top and sees all the books lined up. He nods. Then she continues, "People can take selfies with you two here on the cat bookshelf. I think I'll make a list and then put it up next to the cat bookshelf. It will include all of the books on the cat bookshelf and the name of the cat characters. And then you two can help people choose the right book with the right cat in it for them to read. Why aren't we in a book? Portugal Tom asked Chester. Chester cocks his head and says, I don't know. I have to think about that. Right now, I need breakfast. And off they went to the food bowl while Charlotte scurried around getting ready for the Christmas open house. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell chimed jingle bells. The door opened and there was Polly in a red velvet jumper over a white blouse, her red hair pulled back and tied with a green ribbon. You look very nice.
Thank you. Miss Helen made my dress.
That was very nice of her.
She's teaching me how to sew. It's fun. Last week, I cut out a pattern. Can I help?
I think I'm doing okay getting ready for the open house. What you could do for me is help keep the boys busy and out of my way. Go look at the new cat bookshelf and pick something and read to them.
Okay.
Polly looked through the cat books. She had read Alice in Wonderland, but she stopped when she found the book, A Kitten for Santa. Polly smoothed her dress and sat on the floor with her legs extended and her back against the bookshelf. Chester put his head on her knee. Portugal Tom put his head on her other knee. Reading to the boys for a month has made her confident.
Santa was very busy on Christmas Eve. He climbed down the chimney of the Chesterfield house, sat in the chair, nibbled on a cookie, had a sip of milk. He needed to take a little break. He relaxed and closed his eyes for New York Minute. When he felt a nudge under his hand, he looked down. A small orange tabby cat with green eyes was putting her head under his hand so his hand would fall over her head. Hello, little one, Santa said. The kitten meowed and jumped in Santa's lap. Santa tipped the glass of milk so the kitten could lap some up. When she was done, she looked up at Santa and smiled. He looked over and there was a box marked for Bobby for Christmas. The box was open. Santa walked over. The box had a dish of food and a water bowl and a soft fuzzy blanket. Santa picked up the kitten, looked her in the eye. So you're Bobby's Christmas present, he said, placing her in the box.
Before Polly had time to come to the end of the story, the doorbell chimed again, and Anne came in wearing an elf costume and a Santa hat, carrying 2 pumpkin pies warm from the oven. The store was filled with teapots full of tea and hot chocolate and mulled cider, and it smelled just like Christmas. Then Emery came in with her mother and her brother, and everyone was chattering and eating cookies and brownies and red and white candy canes. The door chimed, and everyone froze. It was Alice Lanford, the postmistress. What was she doing here? Charlotte noticed that Alice was wearing a Christmas sweater with a picture of a reindeer. The reindeer had 2 green Christmas balls hanging off its antlers. Charlotte rushed over and grabbed Alice by the hand. I'm so glad you could make it to the open house, she said. Glad to be invited, Alice said. At that point, everyone realized that Alice was here for the open house. Everyone understood this, except Portugal Tom and Chester, who were still afraid. You have to remember that the last time Chester saw Alice, he bit her on the ankle, and she threatened to chase him out of the back of the post office with a broom. So Chester crouched under the table and watched Alice for a while, and he noticed she had a plate of sugar cookies decorated with green and red sprinkles on her hand, but she didn't have a broom. So after a while, Chester relaxed. A bit later, Charlotte looked over at Alice. Alice was not quite happy. She was bemused. The left side of her mouth had tried to curve into a half smile, and this was because she was eating pumpkin pie, and the pumpkin pie had both vanilla ice cream and whipped cream, so she had absolutely no reason not to be happy. But if bemused was the best she could do, so be it. Alice licks the last of the whipped cream off the back of her spoon. She opens her tote bag, which is big enough to hold a Little League team, and carefully pulls out a box. It is about 6 inches long and beautifully wrapped in gold lame paper and tied with a white lace bow. Charlotte, I'm not sure if you know this, but your mother and I, we went to high school together, and she left this with me to give to you after she passed. Gingerly, Alice hands the box to Charlotte. Charlotte's hands start to shake. Go ahead now, you open it. Your mother wanted you to have this. No one in the room has ever heard Alice so tender. Hesitantly, Charlotte unties the lace and begins to open the box. She pulls back the tissue paper, and inside the box is a Christmas ornament of 2 women dressed in red flannel Christmas pajamas, sitting in bed together, reading from a copy of The Night Before Christmas. Oh my gosh, she says. Charlotte's hand is shaking as she lifts the ornament out of the box. Alice walks over, puts her hand over Charlotte's, and guides her to the tree, and together they hang the ornament. Charlotte brushes away tears with the back of her hand. Alice puts her arms around her, pats her on the back, whispers in her ear, everyone loses their mother. It's going to be okay, darling. It's going to be okay. And one by one, everyone in the room comes over and gives Charlotte a hug. Chester and Portugal Tom are watching. Chester asks Portugal Tom, do you know what they are doing? I have no idea, he says. Once the hugging is over, everyone returns to their seats, chattering and laughing and nibbling on cookies and candies. And then suddenly, it is 5:30, and people start kissing each other on the cheek and saying goodbye. After everyone is gone, Charlotte locks the door, sits in the bay window at the table, looking sad. Chester doesn't like it when Charlotte is sad. He jumps into her lap and starts purring, and she starts to pet him. He's happy, but she still looks a bit sad. He can hear a tapping sound. He looks up and sees that police officer he doesn't really like, but he's tapping on the glass, and he sees Chester, points to Charlotte. Chester puts his paw on Charlotte's shoulder, turns his head, points his nose to the glass. Charlotte looks up, sees Officer Clarkson, pointing at the front door of the bookstore. She shoos Chester off her lap. Chester turns around and gives her a look. With Chester gone, she can get up and goes to unlock the door. Sorry I'm so late. I had to fill out about 2,000 pages of paperwork. Come on in, she said. I was wondering. It's been a very long day, and I know you were busy with the open house. Would you like to go have dinner with me? Charlotte's stomach grumbles in response, and she realizes she hasn't eaten since yesterday. Have you been to the hen house? They have great fried chicken. Sounds wonderful. She turns off the lights, and as she goes to lock the door, she turns to tell the boys good night, and finds them curled up on each end of the cat bookshelf, snoring. Closing the door, She wonders if they are dreaming of sugar plums. After they are gone, Portugal Tom looks at Chester and says, "What's Christmas?" "I have no idea. I thought you knew." I would like to thank Jenny for her wonderful artwork in bringing Chester to life. Without her, Chester would not be what he is. If you enjoyed listening to my story, please hit like and subscribe and leave a comment so my team and I can continue to record these stories for your enjoyment.